My husband brought his pregnant mistress into my house, and his family told me to leave. They thought I would cry. Instead, I destroyed everything they thought they controlled. The pregnant woman was sitting in my mother's chair. Not just any chair, my mother's chair. The ivory armchair she had spent 30 years protecting like it was part of the family itself. The same chair she used to sit in every Sunday morning with a cup of coffee balanced on the armrest while she read mystery novels and criticised politicians on television. Even after she died, I never let anyone sit there. Not friends, not guests, not even my husband. And yet there she was, 24 years old, visibly pregnant. One hand resting protectively over her swollen stomach, while her perfectly manicured fingers brushed against the embroidered fabric like she already owned it. I stood frozen in the doorway of my own living room, and slowly I counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people. 6 people sitting comfortably in my house, drinking my tea, preparing to dismantle my marriage like this was some kind of business meeting. My husband sat beside her, Daniel. My husband of 6 years. The man who once cried while reading his vows to me in front of Lake Ontario during our autumn wedding ceremony in Toronto. The same man who used to kiss my forehead every morning before work. The same man who looked me in the eyes and promised me I would never have to face life alone. Now he couldn't even look directly at me. That told me everything. But the real problem wasn't the affair. It wasn't even the pregnancy. It was the arrogance. The absolute audacity of believing they could walk into my home and decide what would happen to my life. That was the moment something inside me went completely still. Not broken, not shattered, still. And when a woman becomes completely calm after betrayal, that's when people should start getting afraid. I smiled. Not because I was happy, not because anything was funny, but because I suddenly realised they had absolutely no idea who they were dealing with, and they were about to find out. My name is Vanessa. I'm 33 years old. I work as a senior financial compliance analyst for a real estate investment firm in downtown Toronto. And this house, this beautiful 3-story Victorian home in Riverdale, belongs to me. Not my husband, me. That detail matters more than you can imagine, because houses remember things, pain, sacrifice, promises, and my mother built this house with every painful year of her life. My mother, Eleanor Laurent, immigrated to Canada from Haiti in 1989 with 2 suitcases and enough determination to make the universe flinch. She worked double shifts for nearly 15 years. Night shifts, weekend shifts, Christmas shifts, the kind of exhaustion that changes a woman permanently. Her hands developed arthritis before she turned 50. Her knees gave out before retirement, but she kept saving every penny. Because she had one obsession: her daughter would never depend on a man for survival. Ever. That house became her proof. I still remember the day she bought it. I was 11 years old. The roof leaked. The basement smelled like mildew. The kitchen cabinets looked older than civilization itself. But my mother stood in the middle of the empty living room and cried quietly while holding the keys. Because for the first time in her life, nobody could throw her out. Years later, when Daniel and I got engaged, my mother said something that irritated me at the time. Never confuse love with ownership. I laughed. I thought she was being dramatic. Daniel was charming, gentle, soft-spoken, the kind of man everybody trusted immediately. Women adored him. Men respected him. Even my mother liked him, cautiously. But before our wedding, she insisted on one thing. The house remained entirely under my name, only mine. No joint ownership, no shared title, no marital restructuring. At the time, Daniel laughed it off, said he didn't care about material things, said love mattered more than property. Funny how men say that, until property becomes valuable. My mother passed away 14 months after our wedding, breast cancer, aggressive, cruel, fast. I held her hand at Toronto General Hospital at 3:11 in the morning, while machines beeped around us in the darkness. And her final coherent words to me were, "Vanessa, don't ever let softness destroy your future." At the time, I thought she meant grief. I didn't realise she meant men. The first 3 years of marriage were good, not perfect, but good enough to convince me I'd chosen correctly. Daniel had entrepreneurial dreams, big ones, too many of them. A sports marketing startup, then a luxury car rental business, then cryptocurrency consulting. Every 6 months there was another brilliant idea, and every time, I funded it, not because he forced me. because I believed in him. That's the dangerous thing about loyalty. It makes intelligent women participate in their own destruction. I paid debts quietly, covered failed investments quietly, refinanced credit cards quietly. I became an expert at protecting a man's ego from the consequences of his own decisions, and Daniel let me. That part matters too, because weak men rarely destroy women loudly. They do it gradually, softly, one compromise at a time, one disappointment at a time, until you wake up one day realizing you've been carrying an entire marriage alone. The affair started long before I discovered it. I know that now. But at the time, I explained everything away. Late nights became networking events. Distance became stress. Emotional withdrawal became business pressure. That's another lesson life teaches women too late. When you love someone deeply, your brain becomes very creative at protecting your heart from reality. Then came the hotel receipt. I found it on a Thursday afternoon in October, completely by accident. My office closed early because of a power outage downtown, so I came home around 2:30 p.m. The house was quiet, cold. Still, I remember sunlight stretching across the kitchen counter when I noticed the folded receipt beside the coffee machine. One small careless mistake. That's usually how betrayal reveals itself. Not through dramatic confessions, through laziness. The receipt was from the Hazelton Hotel in Yorkville. 2 nights, champagne service, dinner for 2, spa reservation. Meanwhile, Daniel had told me he was attending a business conference in Ottawa. I stared at the receipt for nearly a full minute, waiting to feel something dramatic: rage, heartbreak, nausea. Instead, I felt calm, terrifyingly calm. I took a photo of it with my phone, placed it exactly where I found it, then walked upstairs and sat on the edge of my bed for almost 2 hours in complete silence. And during those 2 hours, I stopped being a wife. I became an investigator. The next morning, I called a lawyer before I called my husband. That decision saved me. A lot of women make the mistake of confronting betrayal emotionally first. They scream, cry, threaten, demand answers. And sometimes that feels satisfying for about 10 minutes, until the lying starts. Because the moment a guilty person realizes they've been discovered, they don't become honest. They become strategic. So instead of confrontation, I chose preparation. Her name was Claire Whitmore, one of the sharpest divorce attorneys in Toronto, late 50s, silver hair, cold blue eyes. The kind of woman who looked like she could dismantle your entire bloodline using legal paperwork and a calm voice. My mother had actually given me her number years earlier, just in case, she'd said. At the time, I rolled my eyes. Now, I understood mothers know things daughters don't. Claire's office overlooked Bay Street, floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture. The kind of office designed to remind wealthy men they were about to lose arguments. I sat across from her while she reviewed the hotel receipt photo on my phone. She didn't gasp, didn't offer sympathy, didn't ask if I was okay. Her first question was, "Whose name?"
Exclusively ours.
A small smile appeared on her face. "Good," she said softly. "Very good." That was the first moment I realized this situation might not end the way Daniel expected. Claire spent nearly an hour explaining strategy, not emotions, strategy. Do not confront him yet. Do not mention divorce. Do not reveal what you know. Gather evidence quietly. Then she leaned forward slightly. And Vanessa, yes. If he's cheating, there's usually more damage beneath the surface than the affair itself. She was right. The affair turned out to be the smallest betrayal. The woman's name was Chloe Bennett, 24 years old, a yoga instructor from Mississauga. Pretty in that effortless Instagram kind of way, soft brown hair, big eyes, delicate voice. The type of woman men describe as peaceful, when what they really mean is young enough not to challenge them yet. She met Daniel during one of his networking events. Translation: a rooftop bar downtown where aging entrepreneurs flirt with women too young to recognize financial instability. I hired a private investigator, and before anyone judges me for that, understand something. Intuition is not evidence, and women lose everything every day because they trusted feelings instead of facts. His name was Marcus Hale, former R, quiet, professional, efficient. He tracked Daniel for three weeks. 3 weeks, that was all it took to destroy 6 years of marriage. The report came in a thick black folder. Photos, hotel records, restaurant receipts, Screenshots, timelines, patterns. The affair had been going on for nearly 9 months. 9 months. Long enough for routines, long enough for emotional intimacy, long enough for him to build an entirely separate life while still sleeping beside me every night. But the real devastation came near the end of the report. Marcus looked uncomfortable when he told me, and that frightened me more than the words themselves. She's pregnant. I honestly don't remember breathing for a few seconds. The room around me felt strangely distant, muted, like my body temporarily stopped recognizing reality. How far along? I asked quietly. About 7 months. 7 months. That meant Daniel knew. For months. He knew while kissing me goodbye every morning. He knew while celebrating our anniversary in Niagara-on-the-Lake 3 months earlier. He knew while helping decorate our Christmas tree. He knew. Still came home every night pretending to be my husband. That realization hurts differently. Affairs are painful, but sustained deception, that destroys trust at the root. I cried in my car afterward. Not dramatically, not loudly. Just silent tears sliding down my face while rain hit the windshield outside the parking garage. Exactly 11 minutes. Then I wiped my face, fixed my makeup, and called Claire, because grief without strategy becomes self-destruction, and I refused to destroy myself for a man already destroying his own future. A week later, life handed me information so shocking it almost felt fictional. I was pregnant too, 5 weeks. I found out during a routine medical appointment at Mount Sinai Hospital. I remember staring at the ultrasound image while the doctor explained hormone levels and prenatal care, but my mind barely processed her voice, because suddenly everything changed. Not emotionally, legally, strategically, psychologically. I left the hospital holding a tiny printed sonogram image in trembling fingers while snow drifted softly across Toronto sidewalks outside. People walked past me carrying coffee cups and shopping bags. Completely unaware, my entire life had just split into 2 timelines, the woman I used to be and the woman I was about to become. I sat in my car for nearly an hour afterward, one hand resting against my stomach, trying to understand how betrayal and new life could exist simultaneously inside the same human heart. That's when I realized something important. Pain and power often arrive together. Most people only focus on the pain. That's why they lose. I called Claire immediately. When I told her about the pregnancy, she went silent for nearly 5 seconds. Then she said something I'll never forget. Vanessa, this strengthens your position enormously. Not congratulations. Not, how are you feeling? No, strategy, again, because emotional situations are often decided by the people who remain logical the longest. Then came the phone call, the one Daniel never intended me to hear. It happened on a Sunday evening. He was outside on the back deck speaking to his mother while I cleaned dishes in the kitchen. The window above the sink was slightly open, and apparently Daniel forgot sound travels. I heard every word. Tuesday night, he said quietly. She'll be home. Pause. No, Mom, I don't want yelling. Another pause. I just want this handled maturely. My stomach tightened instantly. Handled. Women know that word. Handled means controlled, managed, removed. Then he said the sentence that changed everything. Chloe has to come too. Otherwise, Vanessa won't understand. This is serious. I froze. Ice water couldn't have shocked me harder. They were planning an intervention, an ambush. His family intended to arrive at my house with his pregnant mistress and pressure me into leaving quietly. And suddenly, everything became clear. Daniel wasn't just cheating. He genuinely believed I was weak enough to surrender. That hurt more than the affair itself. I dried my hands slowly, turned off the sink, and stood in silence while cold fury settled into my bones. Here's something nobody tells women. There's a moment during betrayal when heartbreak transforms into clarity, and clarity is dangerous. Because once someone stops emotionally reacting, they start calculating. I had 48 hours before Tuesday night, so I prepared. I met with Claire again Monday morning. We reviewed every legal detail carefully, the house ownership, financial protections, divorce leverage, evidence documentation, potential lawsuits, everything. Claire finally leaned back in her chair and looked directly at me. Vanessa, yes, if they come into your home attempting to intimidate you. She paused. They are walking into the wrong battlefield. That sentence stayed with me. Tuesday arrived cold and grey. Toronto looked frozen that evening. The kind of winter night where the air itself feels sharp. I came home from work early, changed clothes, made tea, set out cups, arranged biscuits on a tray, not because I wanted hospitality, because I wanted control. People reveal themselves when they feel comfortable. At exactly 7:06 p.m., the front door opened, and they walked in. Daniel first, then his mother Patricia, his father Leonard, his younger sister Emily and her husband Ryan, and finally, Chloe, 7 months pregnant, wearing a cream-coloured sweater dress, looking nervous, but not nervous enough to stop herself from sitting in my mother's chair. That moment. That was when something inside me became absolutely emotionless, not angry, not hysterical, not wounded, emotionless. And honestly, that terrified even me, because deep down, I already knew exactly how this night was going to end. Patricia Sullivan always walked into rooms like she owned them, even when she didn't, especially when she didn't. She removed her gloves slowly, elegantly, glancing around my living room with the smug confidence of a woman who believed tonight would go exactly according to plan. Leonard stood beside her, silently like usual. That man had perfected emotional absence into an art form. Emily avoided eye contact the second she saw me. Interesting. Guilt always leaks through the weakest person first. Ryan looked deeply uncomfortable. Good. At least one person in that family still possessed a functioning conscience. And Daniel looked terrified. Not guilty, not remorseful, terrified. Because somewhere deep inside himself, he already knew I wasn't reacting the way I was supposed to. Women in these situations are expected to cry, expected to scream, expected to collapse emotionally so everyone can label them unstable afterward. But calm women force people to confront consequences, and consequences scare cowards. I smiled warmly. Tea? The confusion on Patricia's face lasted less than half a second. Then her expression reset itself. Controlled, polished, manipulative. Yes, thank you, Vanessa. I poured carefully while Chloe shifted awkwardly in my mother's chair. Every time she touched that armrest, something cold tightened inside my chest. But I stayed composed, because emotional control is power. And tonight, I intended to hold all of it. Everyone settled into their seats. The atmosphere felt almost theatrical, like a badly written intervention scene from a streaming drama. Except this was real, and real betrayal smells different. It smells like tension, fear, and expense perfume trying to cover dishonesty. Patricia finally spoke first. Vanessa, she began gently, we know this situation is painful. Painful. Interesting choice of word. Not cruel, not humiliating, not devastating. Painful. As though Daniel had accidentally dented my car instead of detonating our marriage. I nodded politely. I'm listening. She exchanged a quick glance with Daniel before continuing. Daniel and Chloe are expecting a child. Her tone softened dramatically on the word child, like she expected motherhood itself to erase morality, and regardless of how unfortunate the circumstances are, there's a baby involved now. I stayed silent. Patricia leaned forward slightly. And we think the healthiest thing for everyone would be a peaceful transition. Transition. Another carefully chosen word. Notice how manipulative people avoid ugly language. Nobody says, we want your husband to replace you. Nobody says, we want you removed from your own life. They dress cruelty in softer vocabulary so they can feel civilized while destroying you. Emily finally jumped in. Vanessa, nobody wants drama. No drama. Right. They brought a pregnant mistress into my living room but wanted no drama. Amazing. Daniel finally cleared his throat. His voice sounded weak. Vanessa, I never wanted to hurt you. That sentence almost made me laugh, because cheaters always say that after months of deliberate betrayal, as though pain was some unfortunate side effect instead of the direct result of their choices. I folded my hands calmly in my lap. Then I looked directly at Chloe. She lowered her eyes immediately. Interesting again. Confidence disappears quickly when fantasy collides with reality. Patricia continued carefully. We're hoping you'll handle this maturely. There it was, the real objective. Compliance. Women are always asked to be mature when other people are mistreating them. Never when they're being respected. Maturity in situations like this usually means, please suffer quietly so nobody feels uncomfortable. I took a slow sip of the tea, then set the cup down gently. What exactly are you asking me for? Silence. A long one. Nobody wanted to say it directly. Because saying ugly things out loud forces people to hear themselves clearly. Finally, Leonard spoke. His deep voice sounded gravelly. Daniel needs stability now, especially with the baby coming. Ah, there it was, not subtle anymore. My home, my stability, my life. Being reassigned to another woman because she got pregnant. Patricia finally delivered the full blow. We think it would be best if you moved out by the end of the month. The room went completely still afterward. Even the ticking clock near the staircase suddenly sounded louder. I stared at her quietly, not because I was shocked, because I wanted silence to do its work. Silence makes people nervous, and nervous people expose themselves. Emily rushed to fill the discomfort. You're strong, Vanessa. You'll recover from this. Recover, like I'd survived an illness. Meanwhile, they were actively trying to remove me from my own home. Ryan looked horrified now. He kept glancing at me like he expected me to explode. But I didn't, because they still misunderstood something fundamental about me. I wasn't emotional anymore. I was prepared. Chloe finally spoke softly. I never wanted to hurt anyone, her voice trembled. And Daniel loves me. There it was, the justification, love. People always invoke love when they want forgiveness for selfishness. I looked at her carefully, young, pregnant, clearly overwhelmed, but still sitting comfortably in another woman's home waiting for her removal. Life lesson: never let innocence fool you into ignoring participation. You can feel sympathy for someone and still hold them accountable. I stood slowly, not aggressively, calmly. Every single pair of eyes followed me immediately. I walked toward the fireplace, picked up a framed photograph of my mother, then turned back toward them. You know what's fascinating? I asked softly. Nobody answered. My mother warned me about this exact moment years ago. Patricia frowned slightly. I continued. She told me weak men create chaos and expect strong women to clean it up afterward. Daniel's face tightened instantly. Good. Truth recognizes itself. I placed the photograph back carefully. Then I faced all of them fully, and something about my expression finally started frightening them. I could see it happening in real time. Patricia straightened subtly. Emily looked down. Leonard shifted in his chair because suddenly they realized I wasn't behaving like a victim, and without a victim, their entire performance started collapsing. I smiled again, small, controlled, cold. If you're all finished, I said quietly, then it's finally my turn. And that's when the entire room changed. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The entire room felt suspended in something heavy and uncomfortable. And for the first time since they walked into my house, I saw uncertainty, real uncertainty. Patricia tried recovering first. That woman had spent decades controlling conversations through confidence alone. But confidence only works if the person is weaker than you expected. And suddenly, she wasn't sure I was weak at all. Vanessa, she said carefully, there's no need to make this hostile. Interesting. Because apparently bringing your son's pregnant mistress into another woman's home to pressure her into disappearing was considered peaceful. But defending yourself, that was hostile. I smiled faintly. You all walked into my house tonight planning to remove me from my own life, I said softly. And somehow I'm the hostile one. Nobody answered. Daniel rubbed both hands together nervously. He always did that when anxious. I used to think it looked vulnerable. Now it just looked guilty. I walked slowly toward the side table beside the staircase where I'd placed a slim black folder earlier that afternoon. Prepared, organized, waiting. That folder changed the entire evening. I picked it up carefully, then turned toward them. I think there are several important misunderstandings happening in this room, I said calmly. Patricia folded her arms. What misunderstandings? The first one, I replied, is this idea that I can be asked to leave this house. I opened the folder, removed a document, then placed it gently onto the coffee table between us. Property title official, stamped, legal, clear. The silence afterward became immediate. Patricia leaned forward first. Leonard followed. Daniel stared at the papers, and all the colour slowly drained from his face. Because finally, reality entered the room. This house, I said quietly, belongs exclusively to me. Nobody moved. I continued. My name is the only name on the title. I looked directly at Patricia now. Not Daniel's, then Leonard. Not yours, then Chloe. And certainly not hers. Chloe immediately looked down. Good. Let reality settle. I kept speaking calmly. My mother purchased this property long before my marriage. It remained protected under my sole ownership before, during and after marriage under Ontario property law. Daniel finally spoke. Weakly, Vanessa, we can discuss. No, I interrupted quietly. The room froze again. Even Daniel looked stunned, because I had never interrupted him before, not once in 6 years. Funny how quickly dynamics change when respect dies. You don't get to guide this conversation anymore, I said calmly. His mouth closed instantly, and something strange happened right there. For the first time in our marriage, Daniel looked small. Not physically, spiritually. Like a man suddenly realizing the woman he underestimated had stopped carrying him emotionally. That realization destroys weak men faster than anger ever could. Patricia tried again. Well, regardless of paperwork, surely you understand Daniel's child needs stability. There it was again, the baby. Used like a shield every single time accountability approached. I nodded slowly. I agree, I said. That surprised them. Patricia relaxed slightly. Big mistake. Children absolutely deserve stability, I continued softly. Which is why I find it fascinating that your son destroyed 2 families simultaneously. Patricia's expression hardened instantly. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. Good. Truth should sting. Emily shifted uncomfortably. Ryan looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor, and Chloe looked terrified now. Not confident, not victorious, terrified. Because fantasy relationships feel romantic until consequences arrive carrying legal documents. I took another paper from the folder, then another, then another. Hotel receipts, photographs, investigator reports, phone records, and one by one, I placed them onto the table. Nobody touched them at first, but everyone stared. The room changed completely. Gone was the confidence. Gone was the superiority. Now there was only exposure. I hired a private investigator 6 weeks ago, I said calmly. Patricia blinked rapidly. Daniel whispered my name under his breath. Too late, way too late. The affair has been documented thoroughly, I continued. Hotels, trips, financial transfers, text messages, timelines. I looked directly at Daniel. You were very careless. He looked physically sick now. Good. Because betrayal should cost something. Life lesson. People who underestimate quiet women usually mistake silence for weakness. It isn't weakness, it's observation. Patricia's voice became sharper now. Are you threatening us? I laughed softly for the first time all evening, not loudly, just enough to make everyone uncomfortable. No, I said gently, I'm educating you. That silence afterward? Heavy. Dangerous. The kind of silence where people suddenly realize they walked into a battle completely unprepared. I sat down slowly again, composed, controlled. Then I folded my hands in my lap. My attorney already has copies of everything, Daniel inhaled sharply. Patricia went pale. And that's when fear finally entered the room for real. Not emotional fear, practical fear. The kind wealthy families feel when reputation becomes vulnerable. Because suddenly, this wasn't a messy private affair anymore. It was documented, structured, legal. I looked toward Daniel carefully. You lied to me for nearly a year, I said quietly. While I paid bills, managed finances, protected your image, protected your ego. His eyes filled slightly. I felt absolutely nothing. That part shocked me most. I used to love this man so deeply that seeing him sad physically hurt me. Now, nothing. Because repeated betrayal eventually kills emotional attachment completely. That's another lesson nobody teaches women early enough. Love can die long before relationships end. Chloe suddenly spoke through trembling tears. I didn't know what to do. Interesting sentence. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I regret this. Just, I didn't know what to do. Translation. She wanted sympathy without responsibility. I looked at her carefully, then spoke gently. You knew he was married. She started crying harder immediately. And honestly, part of me did feel sorry for her. Not because she was innocent. Because she was young enough to believe a man who betrays his wife will somehow become trustworthy afterward. That fantasy ruins thousands of women every year. Patricia stood suddenly. We are not criminals. I tilted my head slightly. Aren't you? That sentence hit harder than yelling ever could, because calm accusations sound more believable than emotional ones. Daniel stood too now, pacing slightly, panicking visibly. Vanessa, please, let's just talk privately. There it was, isolation. The desperate attempt to regain emotional control away from witnesses. I smiled coldly. No, one word. Sharp enough to cut glass. Daniel stopped moving. And for the first time that night, he looked afraid of me. Not physically afraid. Worse, afraid he no longer understood me at all. And honestly, he didn't. Because the woman who once protected his feelings was gone. The silence after my last word felt almost violent. No, such a small word. But sometimes a single word changes the entire balance of power in a room. Daniel stood frozen near the fireplace, staring at me like he'd suddenly realized he never actually knew the woman he married. And honestly, maybe he didn't, because people only know the version of you that circumstances allow them to see. Weak times create soft versions of us. Betrayal creates different women entirely. Patricia sat back down slowly. Her confidence was cracking now. You could hear it in her breathing, see it in the way her fingers tightened around her handbag, because suddenly this wasn't a controlled family intervention anymore. It was exposure, and deep down, she knew they were losing. I looked around the room carefully, at every face, every shifting expression, every flicker of fear. Then I reached into the pocket of my cardigan and pulled out the folded ultrasound photo. The movement itself seemed to change the atmosphere instantly. Daniel's eyes locked onto the paper, instinctively, almost nervously. I held the sonogram between my fingers for a moment, then spoke calmly. There's one more thing all of you should know. Nobody interrupted. Nobody even breathed loudly. I went to Mount Sinai Hospital yesterday morning. Daniel frowned immediately. Patricia looked confused. Emily glanced nervously between us, and Chloe already looked like she sensed danger approaching. I unfolded the ultrasound carefully, then placed it beside the property documents. I'm pregnant. The room exploded silently. That's the only way I can describe it. Nobody screamed. Nobody shouted. But emotionally, everything detonated. Daniel went completely pale. Not metaphorically, actually pale, like blood physically abandoned his body. "What?" he whispered. His voice cracked badly on the word. Patricia stared at me in stunned disbelief. Emily covered her mouth instantly. Leonard muttered something under his breath that sounded like a curse. And poor Chloe looked like the floor disappeared underneath her. She pressed one trembling hand against her stomach while staring at me with wide, terrified eyes. Because suddenly, she wasn't carrying the only future anymore. I stayed perfectly calm. 5 weeks, I said softly. Daniel looked destroyed, absolutely destroyed. And for one brief moment, I finally saw the full weight of consequences hit him. Not guilt, consequences. There's a difference. Guilt is emotional. Consequences are practical. Practical pain terrifies selfish people far more than morality ever will. Vanessa, Daniel breathed. He took one step toward me. I immediately stepped back. His face collapsed slightly after that. Good. Let him feel distance, real distance. The kind betrayal creates permanently. Patricia recovered first again. That woman survived emotionally through control. So the second she regained balance, she recalculated. Instantly. "Oh my God," she whispered dramatically. "Vanessa, why didn't you tell us?" Us. Interesting choice again. 10 minutes earlier, they were trying to replace me. Now suddenly I was family again. Because now there was another baby involved. A legitimate heir. Another grandchild. Another complication. I almost admired how quickly manipulative people adapt. Almost. "You didn't care about me 11 minutes ago," I said quietly. Patricia froze. "You were asking me to leave my own home." "No, yes," I interrupted calmly. "You were." Silence again. The dangerous kind. The kind where truth sits openly in the room and nobody can bury it anymore. Daniel still looked stunned. "You're really pregnant?" he asked quietly. I stared at him for several seconds before answering. That pause mattered. Because for the first time in 6 years, I wanted him to feel uncertainty. "Yes," I finally said. His eyes filled instantly. And for a fraction of a second, I saw genuine grief, not for me, for himself. Because suddenly Daniel understood the magnitude of what he destroyed. A marriage, a family, a future. And men like Daniel never fully understand loss until consequences become irreversible. Life lesson: some people only value loyalty after they lose access to it. By then, it's usually too late. Chloe suddenly stood up from my mother's chair, fast, shaky. Tears streamed down her face now, real tears this time. Not controlled ones, not strategic ones, real panic. "I didn't know," she whispered. And for the first time all evening, she looked less like a mistress and more like a frightened young woman who suddenly realized she built her future on another woman's destruction. That realization crushes people, especially when reality finally arrives. Daniel moved toward her instinctively, and something about that tiny movement irritated me deeply. Because even now, even standing in the ruins of our marriage, he still wanted to manage emotions instead of accountability. Classic Daniel, always emotionally soft, always morally weak. never fully choosing anyone. That's the thing about weak men. They don't just destroy one woman, they damage everyone connected to them. Patricia suddenly looked at me differently now. Not with superiority, not even anger calculation again. I recognized it immediately. She was reassessing inheritance, assets, optics, family reputation, public image. And honestly, that disgusted me more than the affair itself. Because manipulative people don't love conditionally, they value strategically. I folded my hands calmly again. There's one final detail, I said softly. Every head turned toward me immediately. And suddenly, even Daniel looked nervous. Good, he should be. I tilted my head slightly. The baby might not be Daniel's. If silence could physically shatter glass, that moment would have destroyed every window in the house. Daniel stared at me blankly, actually blankly, like his brain temporarily stopped functioning. Patricia looked horrified. Emily gasped aloud. Leonard stood up so abruptly, his chair scraped violently against the hardwood floor. And Chloe sat back down heavily like her knees stopped working. Daniel finally spoke. Barely. What? I kept my expression perfectly neutral, cold, measured, controlled. I repeated softly, I haven't decided whether I'll confirm paternity yet. That statement hit Daniel harder than the affair evidence, harder than the property documents, harder than the divorce threat. Because guilt changes people. When someone betrays you, they immediately believe betrayal is possible from everyone else too. That's the psychological irony of cheating. Cheaters become paranoid because they know exactly what dishonesty looks like. And Daniel instantly believed me, not because it was true, because deep down, he knew what he himself was capable of. His face completely collapsed. Every ounce of confidence left him at once. Vanessa, he whispered weakly. I held his gaze calmly. The baby was absolutely his. I knew that, but he didn't. And uncertainty. Uncertainty is one of the cruelest emotional prisons in existence, especially for people who created pain carelessly. Patricia looked panicked now. Vanessa, sweetheart, let's not say things we can't take back. Sweetheart. Amazing. Women have become sweetheart the second manipulative people lose control. I almost smiled. But I didn't. Because this wasn't revenge anymore. It was correction. And correction requires precision. Nobody spoke. Nobody even seemed capable of speaking. The room looked emotionally wrecked. And honestly, good. Because for nearly a year, I had been the only person carrying emotional devastation quietly, while everyone else built comfort on top of my ignorance. Now the truth finally belonged to everybody. Daniel stared at me like his entire reality had cracked open. The baby might not be mine, he repeated weakly. There's something deeply unsettling about watching certainty leave a person in real time, especially a man who once moved through life believing he controlled every emotional situation around him. Now he looked lost, not angry, lost. And the worst part, I knew exactly why the possibility destroyed him so completely. Because guilt creates imagination. A faithful man would question me. A dishonest man immediately believes betrayal is possible. That's the psychological punishment cheaters rarely expect. Their own actions poisoned their ability to trust anyone afterward. I stayed calm, completely calm, which somehow frightened everyone even more. Patricia stood again. But this time there was no elegance left in her posture, no superiority, no control, only panic wrapped in expensive wool. Vanessa, she said carefully, we can work through this together. Together, that word almost made me laugh. 10 minutes earlier, they wanted me removed from my own house like unwanted furniture. Now, suddenly we were together again. Funny how quickly people rediscover compassion when consequences threaten them personally. I tilted my head slightly. No, I said softly. The room froze again. There is no together anymore. Daniel inhaled sharply. And for the first time all evening, I saw tears actually forming in his eyes. Real ones, not manipulative, not strategic. Real. But here's the dangerous truth about repeated betrayal. Eventually, the victim stops caring about the betrayer's pain entirely. And once that emotional switch flips, there's usually no going back. Daniel took another cautious step toward me. Vanessa, please, such a desperate word. I looked directly into his eyes. And suddenly memories started flashing through my mind like broken glass. Our wedding vows beside the lake. Sunday mornings drinking coffee together. The night he held my hand while burying my mother. The evenings I stayed awake helping him fix business proposals. The money I quietly transferred to save his failing ventures. The loyalty, the sacrifices, the love. All of it poisoned now. That's what betrayal really does. It contaminates memory itself. I trusted you, I said quietly. Daniel's face crumpled immediately. Not because I raised my voice, because I didn't. Calm disappointment hurts far worse than screaming. Especially from someone who loved you completely once. I trusted you enough to build my future around you, I continued softly. And you repaid that trust by building another life behind my back. Nobody moved. Nobody interrupted. Even Patricia stayed silent now, because some truths are too heavy to manipulate. Daniel wiped at his eyes quickly. Vanessa, I made mistakes. Mistakes. There it was. The word weak people use when they want forgiveness without fully acknowledging destruction. An affair isn't a mistake. Buying the wrong groceries is a mistake. Forgetting an anniversary is a mistake. A year of lies is a decision. I looked at Chloe carefully. She looked devastated. Mascara running slightly, hands trembling, and despite everything, I did feel something for her. Not forgiveness, not affection, but awareness. Because women like Chloe often don't realise they're entering unfinished emotional wars until it's too late. She probably believed Daniel's version of events, that our marriage was already broken, that I was cold, distant, emotionally unavailable. Men rarely present themselves as villains in their own stories, and younger women often mistake wounded men for honest ones. Life lesson: never trust a man who speaks badly about the woman currently sacrificing for him. One day, he'll speak about you the same way. I turned toward Patricia again. Earlier tonight, I said softly, you told me to leave this house by the end of the month. Her face tightened immediately. I was emotional. No, I interrupted calmly. You were confident. That sentence hit her hard, because it was true. Patricia hadn't misspoken. She genuinely believed I would surrender quietly. That belief exposed exactly how little respect they ever had for me. And honestly, that realization healed something inside me, because suddenly I understood. I had spent years shrinking myself emotionally to protect people who would never protect me back. Never again. I walked slowly toward the front door, unlocked it, then pulled it open. Cold Toronto air rushed into the hallway immediately. Snow drifted lightly outside beneath the streetlights. The house became completely silent. Everyone stared at me. You need to leave now. Nobody moved initially. Shock does that to people, especially people unaccustomed to consequences. Daniel looked horrified. Vanessa, please don't do this. I looked directly at him. You already did. That sentence, something inside him. I saw it happen. His shoulders dropped slightly. His expression hollowed out. Because finally, he understood. This wasn't temporary anger. This wasn't a rough patch. This wasn't something his charm could repair later. He had actually lost me, completely. And deep down, I think that realization terrified him more than divorce itself. Patricia finally gathered her purse shakily. Vanessa, she whispered. We're still family. No, I replied softly. We're history. Silence again. Heavy, permanent. Leonard walked out, first, ashamed, avoiding eye contact completely. Emily followed next while quietly crying. Ryan gave me one long sympathetic look before leaving too. Interesting. Sometimes the only decent people in toxic families are outsiders who married into them. Then came Chloe. She stood slowly from my mother's chair, and for a brief moment our eyes met, really met. No performance, no manipulation, just two women standing inside the wreckage one weak man created. And suddenly she looked incredibly young. Not glamorous, not victorious, just scared. I'm sorry, she whispered, and strangely believed her. I nodded once, nothing more. Because some apologies arrived too late to repair anything, she walked out quietly afterward, leaving my mother's chair empty again. Finally, Daniel remained alone in the doorway. The silence between us felt enormous. 6 years together, and somehow we ended here. He looked at me like he wanted to memorize my face, like he was desperately searching for a version of reality where this still worked out.
But consequences had finally arrived.
And consequences don't negotiate with regret. The baby, he whispered weakly. His voice broke badly. There it was. The uncertainty. The poison he created for himself. I stared at him for several long seconds, then answered calmly, You'll find out eventually. His face completely collapsed after that, and suddenly I understood something important. Closure is a privilege, not a right. and not everyone deserves immediate peace after destroying someone else's. Daniel stood there another few seconds before finally walking backward out of the house, slowly, like a man leaving his own funeral. Then I closed the door, and the sound of the lock clicking shut felt like freedom. After the door closed, I stood there in silence. Complete silence, no voices, no manipulation, no tension poisoning the air anymore, just me, and the sound of my own breathing. For a long moment, I didn't move. I simply stared at the front door while snow drifted quietly outside the glass panels. Then slowly, I locked it. Deadbolt first, then the handle lock, then the security latch. Click, click, click. Each sound felt strangely emotional, like I wasn't locking people out. I was sealing a chapter shut forever. And honestly, I expected to collapse after that. I expected tears, a breakdown, some dramatic emotional release. But instead, I felt calm. Not happy, not relieved. Just clean. Like something rotten had finally been cut out of my life. I walked back into the living room slowly, and there it was again, my mother's chair, empty now, thank God. I stood in front of it quietly for several seconds before brushing my fingertips gently across the embroidered armrest, the same armrest Chloe had touched while imagining herself living inside my life. That thought should enraged me. Instead, it exhausted me. Because that's another truth nobody warns women about. Eventually, betrayal becomes, if emotionally tiring, more than painful. You stop wanting revenge, you just want peace. I sat down carefully in the chair across from it and rested one hand against my stomach. 5 weeks, tiny, fragile, completely innocent, and suddenly the entire house felt different, not empty. Protective, like the walls themselves understood something precious, still existed here despite everything that happened. I started crying then, quietly, not for Daniel, not even for the marriage. I cried for myself, for the version of me that loved without fear, the version that believed loyalty guaranteed safety, the version that kept making excuses for someone slowly destroying her emotionally. That woman was gone now, and honestly, she needed to be. The divorce process started 3 days later. Daniel moved into a furnished rental condo downtown near Liberty Village. Apparently, Chloe refused to move in with him immediately. Interesting. Affairs thrive in fantasy. Reality suffocates them quickly, especially once bills, stress, shame, and public consequences arrive. Claire handled everything aggressively, efficiently, precisely. And Daniel's legal team folded almost immediately once they reviewed the evidence. Because here's the thing weak men never expect. The women they underestimate usually know far more than they reveal. Bank records exposed financial lies, business debts surfaced, hidden transfers appeared. Daniel had used joint marital funds during parts of the affair. Hotels, trips, luxury gifts. That mattered legally. A lot. Suddenly, the charming entrepreneur image started collapsing publicly, and once appearances crack, people start noticing truths they ignored before. Friends became distant. Business contacts stopped responding. Even some family members quietly withdrew support. Because betrayal looks romantic in secret. Publicly, it just looks pathetic. Daniel called me constantly during those first few weeks. Voicemails, texts, long emotional paragraphs about regret, about mistakes, about wanting another chance. I ignored almost all of them. Not because I was cruel, because I finally understood something important. A man who truly values you rarely needs to lose you completely before realizing your worth. One evening, about 2 months after the confrontation, Daniel showed up at the house unexpectedly. I almost didn't open the door, but curiosity won, and honestly, I barely recognized him. He looked exhausted, older, like stress had physically removed years from his face. His expensive coats were gone, his confidence too. Funny how quickly arrogance disappears when stability vanishes. He stood on the porch holding flowers. Of course, men always arrive with flowers after setting entire lives on fire. "Vanessa," he said softly. I crossed my arms. "What do you want?" He looked down briefly, then back at me. I ruined everything. Simple sentence. Late realization, I said nothing. Snow drifted softly around us while cars passed slowly on the street nearby. Finally, he spoke again. "I loved you." Past tense. Interesting. I looked at him carefully. "You loved access to me," I replied quietly. That hit him hard, because deep down, he knew it was true. He loved the emotional safety I provided, the financial stability, the loyalty, the forgiveness, the comfort. But love without respect eventually becomes exploitation, and exploitation destroys relationships slowly from the inside. Daniel's eyes filled slightly again. "The baby," he whispered. "There's no other man, is there?" I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because guilt had tortured him exactly the way I intended. The truth? There was never another man, not even emotionally. I had remained loyal through every moment of his betrayal. But Daniel didn't deserve immediate peace anymore. Some uncertainty was earned. I stared at him calmly, then finally answered. "You'll receive the paternity results after the birth." His face tightened painfully, and suddenly I understood something fascinating. For months I had lived inside uncertainty because of him. Now uncertainty belonged to him instead. Life has strange symmetry sometimes. He nodded slowly, defeated, then quietly handed me the flowers. I didn't take them. After several awkward seconds, he lowered them himself. "I'm sorry," he whispered. And for the first time since everything happened, I believed him completely. But belief and reconciliations are not the same thing. That's another lesson life teaches painfully. Sometimes people become genuinely sorry only after consequences educate them. But by then, the damage is irreversible. "I know," I said softly. Then I closed the door. Daniel lost his job 3 months later, ironically, not because of me. One of his co-workers had apparently seen him repeatedly entering hotels with Chloe long before our separation became public. Once rumors spread inside the company, human resources investigated quietly. His executive contract contained morality and reputational conduct clause. And suddenly, the charismatic businessman image became a liability. Terminated, just liked. Life lesson, character eventually becomes visible. Always. Maybe not immediately. Maybe not publicly at first. But eventually, patterns expose people. I heard through mutual friends that Chloe gave birth to a baby boy in late summer. Daniel attended the birth. Of course he did. But by then, their relationship was already deteriorating badly. Stress destroys fantasy quickly, especially relationships built on dishonesty. Because if someone cheats with you, part of you always fears they'll cheat on you too. That fear poisons everything. Meanwhile, my own pregnancy became the center of my life. And slowly, something beautiful started happening. I stopped thinking about betrayal every morning, then every week, then sometimes not at all. Healing is strange that way. It doesn't arrive dramatically, it arrives quietly, one peaceful morning at a time, one moment of not hurting, then another, and eventually, you realize survival became your new normal. My daughter was born in early April during a snowstorm. 8 pounds, bright eyes, strong lungs. The nurse placed her against my chest while tears rolled silently down my face. And in that moment, every painful thing that happened suddenly felt distant. Not erased, just smaller. I named her Eleanor, after my mother, because strong women deserve to echo through generations. Sometimes late at night, I walk through the house holding Eleanor while soft music plays quietly in the background. And occasionally, I think about that night. The 6 people sitting in my living room, the betrayal, the humiliation they intended for me, the confidence they walked in with, and the silence they left with. Then I look around this house, my house, and I realize something powerful. They thought they were taking my future from me, but all they really did was remove the people unworthy of sharing it. My mother used to say something when life became difficult. Never let betrayal convince you to abandon yourself. I understand that now, because in the end, I didn't lose my home. I didn't lose my future. I didn't even lose myself. The only thing I lost was a man too weak to deserve access to any of it. And honestly, that was never a loss at all. If this story moved you in any way, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And remember this. Sometimes the worst betrayal of your life becomes the moment you finally discover your real strength.